So for the agenda, what we are going to be talking about is the Paycheck Protection Program. If you're not here for that, you can drop off. The existing PPP, how does the existing PPP change now with the new law? And then also with the new PPP, who's eligible? How do I do it? What do I do? And then finally, we're also going to talk about other changes that have come into play related to 2020, 21, and 2022. All right, the existing PPP, we are calling this now round one, draw one. I'm sorry, it's actually round two, draw one. Sorry about that typo. It's round two because we are now in round two. But it refers to round one, which is the very first draw. So this is applicable for those people who already had received a PPP, also those who have not received a PPP. Because there are many people who did not get the PPP, either the monies ran out or that they felt they didn't need it. That opens up again. So that is also allowed to be utilized for supplier costs and expenses for operations added. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end with the forgiveness. But it really means that there are more expenses that can be utilized. The calculation is going to be the same, where the calculation is going to be your monthly average payroll. Monthly average payroll divided by 12 times 2.5. So you're getting about 10 weeks of funds. It does exclude, that calculation excludes anyone who had over 100,000 annual, all right? And there are exclusions related to employees and owners as well. This round is open until March 31. One of the other things that happened with this round one was related to the forgiveness with the EIDL. And we'll go into that a little bit more as well. But with round one, when you asked for forgiveness, you had to back out any grant that was received. And that meant you really, in essence, had to pay it back somehow. That grant is no longer having to be repaid. Okay, so it's a little bit confusing, and I know there are a lot of numbers and acronyms being thrown around here. So if anybody has any questions, please do unmute yourself and ask. Okay, so with this forgiveness of round one, forgiveness is based on 24 weeks. So remember I said that the calculation was based on 10 weeks of average salary. But what the Congress has been able to do is say, okay, well, 10 weeks is not enough. We know we gave you those monies, but we're going to give you 24 weeks in order to have that forgiveness. So that really means if you've got a business which is in operation, at least some sort, there really should be, you should be able to get 100% forgiveness. All right. The one big item, though, is the gross payroll still needs to have 60% of the available costs. All right. So 6% must be related to the payroll cost. Now, why that says available costs is because there are a couple of tricky calculations that if you're close, you might be able to increase that amount, but it's that available cost. It's not just of the total of the loan. Again, from a maximum perspective, employees are limited to that 46,154. Owner employees, partners and such, those are limited to 20,833. Okay, so for those who are self-employed, or that's where that comes into play a bit for you. Now, the forms that are out there, it's a 3508 EZ. That's a simple one. That's the one you want to use if you are self-employed and you have no employees. And I'll actually show you an example of one of these. The 3508S is a simple form. This is the ones that are less than 50,000. This is the one that came out back in November. And so for those companies that have less than 50,000 in a PPP, you can ask for forgiveness using this simple form. Oftentimes you have to give your payroll register, another form of information, but it's a relatively simple form. The new form, again, this is brand new with the new law. This is, I'm not sure what it's going to be called here. New form 34508. This is for if the PPP was under 150,000. Again, it's going to be a simple form. We don't have to do all the calculations. The 3508, without any numbers, names after it, that is the one which is for loans greater than 150,000. And this one is one where you have to have tables. You have to have the list of all the employees. They want a lot more information, including receipts and such. So if you have a loan which is greater than 150,000, it will take some time to make sure you've got all the calculations done properly. Any questions on those forms? Okay. As I mentioned on the other page, the EIDL grant had been in there as being a reduction. You had to reduce that, so you ended up having to pay that back. That does not happen. So I know a couple of clients, they had to pay that back. They will be getting that back from the financial institution. So just keep aware of that. You want to file through the financing institution website. All right. I know one person who walked it down to her bank in paper, and they're like, we don't know what to do with that. So make sure you're on the website that does it. They will have a lot of information, including what's going to be important is the PPP loan number and the SBA loan number. The deadline. This is important also. The deadline for the application for forgiveness. This doesn't say you have to use it or anything like that. The deadline for the forgiveness is 10 months after the end of the 24-week period. Then the bank has 60 days, and then the SBA has 90 days for approval. So if you're looking at this, if you have a PPP, again, this is round one. If you have PPP that you received in April, you're 10 weeks, or you're 24 weeks up in sometime in October, you then add 60 days to that, and then 90 days to that. You're sometime in May or August, September, it's a long time. The fact is that you keep the documentation and you hold on to that. And now with the SBA doing a whole nother round, I know somebody who did apply back in August, they still haven't even heard yet. Okay. So understand that this does take some time for everybody, for all the systems to work out. Okay, this is a sample of the 3508S. And I've tried to make this as large as possible. This is the one for $50,000 or less, okay? The one which is a simple form is very, very similar. The easy form is very, very similar. It has basic information, the borrower name, the address, a DBA number if applicable, the business EIN number, and why did I do that? Phone number, etc. These two items marked in red are what's critical because this is how they identify your information. And again, if you're doing it through the bank, you're going to upload this form. It is a PDF. You're going to upload this form, but if you're doing it through the banking system also, they will often have your information as well. TD Bank, for example, M&T already had that information for many of my clients. You've got the PPP loan amount here and the disbursement date, the employees at the time of application and forgiveness. This one also, the employees at time of loan application, the minimum number there is 1. Even though you are self-employed, you are still considered an employee for this purposes. Okay, so the minimum number there is 1. The IDL advance amount, again, that was because they were reducing that. You still want to put that in if you did get an advance, that EIDL application number, and then the forgiveness amount. And that forgiveness amount, you should put in for the full amount of the PPP loan. Then there are about 6 or 7 questions that you initial on this form, whether it's through the website or on this form, and that's it. It really is an easy form. Okay. Questions on forgiveness application or anything like that now?
Yeah, Amy, does the EIDL advance include the grant, or is that an actual loan amount?
So the grant, let's say you have 3 employees and you receive 3,000 as a grant, that advance, correct? That advance is the one that we're talking about. That
Okay.
becomes, does not have to be paid back in this process. Okay?
Thank you.
Now, on the EIDL, it is income to you also, because that is a grant. And that's actually identified here. Any type of grants here received. So that $3,000 is income for your business. Okay. However, if it is also, if you've got the 3,000, I'm sorry, the EIDL is a loan, my mistake, sorry. That advance, if you look at the total of your advance when you sign the EIDL, if you just received a grant and did not receive the full loan, that grant advance is income. Okay, so the grant advance, if you said you had 3 people, if you recall when you were doing the form, it was just a little checkbox. You want this advance. Okay. And if you got that, great. You got that $3,000. You do not have to pay that back. That's a grant. However, if you got also a EIDL loan, that full loan of, call it $87,000 or something like that, that's a loan and you still have to pay that loan back. All right. Does that make sense? So there are 2 differences there, that grant at the beginning and then the loan.
But the EIDL grant,
Both.
the grant is taxable though, right?
The grant will be taxable, yes. If you've already included, if you have to pay that back, and when they send you the statements and they say, you know, that $87,000 is actually $90,000 that you borrowed, they're including that $3,000 that you got in as an advance into your numbers. But that was a document that you signed saying that is a loan amount. So you really have to look at that on that statement to see how much it was.
Yeah, Amy, my specific question was on that last slide of yours, the Form 3508S, where it
Yes.
says EIDL advance amount. Is that both the grant and a loan, or is that
No.
just the grant?
Just the grant.
Okay,
And the
Got it.
reason was, at the time, prior to this, they were saying that grant reduced the amount of the forgiveness, and they have changed that. So this actually just came out. Yeah, actually, I got this off the website, and this one is being modified as we speak to relate it, because the expiration date, this expiration date says 10/31/2020, and that's been modified. But I got this, you know, about 10 o'clock last night, and this was the latest one on the website.
And Amy, another question, will there be tax forms that are sent to the taxpayer?
So the 1099, I'm not sure what they're going to be sending to the taxpayer. I believe it's going to be some sort of a 1099. Okay, for miscellaneous income. Yes, because you had to provide your EIN number and everything else. So that is one way for you, for them to identify it.
And they're going to assume that if it's going to be forgiven, you're going to get that form, even if you didn't get the forgiveness?
Yes, you're going to get, well, yes, well, no. Yes, no, and everything else in between. The PPP is actually considered a loan. Okay. That PPP was, it's just a loan. The forgiveness, they said from the very beginning, would not be income. Okay. So you're not going to get anything from the bank stating that you have any income related to the PPP. Okay. That anytime that you got like a Delco Strong grant, and I'm going a little bit advanced here. A lot of people got Delco Strong. A lot of people got, you know, a New Jersey grant or a state grant or a local county grant. Those are going to be income to the business. Those, Tim, yes, they will be getting a 1099 in all likelihood from the granting authority.
Amy, it's Richard Marcus.
Yeah.
Just a quick clarifying question. So if I'm applying for the first time as a sole proprietor, and do I want a grant where I pay taxes back on it, or do I want a loan to try to get forgiveness if I'm a sole proprietor or a person of one? Which seems to be the best way to go?
The best way to go, you want to do the calculations, but first of all, with a sole proprietor, with the grant from the EIDL grant, that is only based upon actual employees. So if you're a sole proprietor, you will not get anything on that.
Okay,
You can still apply for an EIDL loan.
right.
Okay, so it's still open and we'll go through that. That though is at 3.75% for 30 years. So it's not bad. And but you have to do the application and they will come up with a calculation for how much you will get for that.
And can you get forgiveness on that?
There is no forgiveness on that. Now, the PPP, however.
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
Yeah, the PPP is actually where you can have forgiveness, and that's the one that you want to take a look at your expenses and see what you can have in terms of your income. And I'll go through a little bit of that as well. Okay.
Okay, so
But
you'd
the
be looking at
PPP
PPP. That's what you'd look at as a sole proprietor.
Yeah, as a sole proprietor, you want to look at the PPP and you want to use line 31 of your 2019 tax return.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let me just talk about this a little bit more related to taxes because there was a lot of discussion going on this fall. The original act back in the CARES Act said specifically the PPP forgiveness is not taxable. So that was great. Everyone just assumed, okay, great, I don't have to pay taxes on that. And then IRS changed their mind and said, that's fine, but you can't double dip. You also will not be able to use those expenses as a tax deduction. All right, so many of you might have heard that. That is what changed then in December 27th. Those expenses, those payroll expenses that you have are eligible as a tax expense now. So that's why the income is not the forgiveness is not income and the expenses are expenses. Okay, so the net effect of a PPP will be the fact that on the books, you're going to recognize income and you're going to have those expenses and you're going to be fine. And on the tax return, you're going to have those expenses. All right. So the good thing is there are no additional taxes to be paid related to the PPP. If you got $25,000 from the PPP, you do not have to pay additional monies to the tax authorities based upon that.
So the PPP forgiven isn't income on a tax return,
No, it is not.
but you can still take the expenses?
You can take the expenses. Thank you, Congressman. Yeah, the PPP came out specifically because they're
That's
giving
right.
money to people and they don't want to, everybody was spent. The whole purpose of the PPP, remember, was to save people in payroll, was to keep the economy going. So if they gave $30,000 to a company and then they now have to pay $10,000 of that back, well, what was the purpose of that? So they immediately said at the very beginning that was not taxable. And the expenses are a deduction for tax purposes. So there is no effect for taxes with the PPP loan forgiveness.
So once it's forgiven, it's basically a non-taxable grant. I mean, for all intents and purposes. That you can also.
Yeah. And for those of you who are tax people and you look at your tax return, it's going to be on the Schedule M as being a book to tax adjustment. Okay.
Gotcha.
So yes. And for book purposes, I have everyone recorded in other income below your operating income number. So when you're doing comparisons, you want to look at your operating income, not your net income there.
Right.
Because for some people, it could really throw off those numbers. All right. And when you look at it, oh, why didn't I do as well last year? Oh, right. I had a, $100,000 PPP loan. So, yes.
I was tax-free.
Tax-free.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Now, recognize states may be different. Okay. I think Pennsylvania, and I haven't heard yet, I think Pennsylvania does follow federal for this. They've talked about it, whether or not they were going to do it. I'm pretty sure Pennsylvania is going to be following the IRS rules because they usually do. I don't know about the other states. All right. Any questions? Because this is a big change that happened in December. And this is where a lot of businesses went, yes, we've got it. All right. Okay. Now we're going to go to what I call R2D2.
I'm sorry, Amy,
Yeah.
you had a bullet point on that last slide that unemployment compensation is taxable. Can you explain that, please?
Yes. So for many people, they received unemployment. Individuals received unemployment. You might have been let go from your job, etc. So as an individual, if you received unemployment compensation, both from the federal and from the state, that is taxable.
Okay, that's not referring to any business expense, though.
No, it's just,
Okay,
there are
got it.
people who also might have had a W-2 job as well as their other job. And if they received that, I just wanted to include that for people.
Good, thank you.
Yep. Okay, now we get to R2D2. I'm a geek and I recognize it. This is the round 2, draw 2. So this is for the people who already took round 1. All right. So if you did not take round 1, you can still apply. And that's what I've talked about before. This is a round 2. There are different forms required for this. The eligibility is substantially different in round 2. Okay. You have to have under 300 employees. The whole purpose of this was to get to the small businesses, not the Shake Shacks, not the other companies that Wells Fargo handed out. Okay. They are looking to help the small business owners. So we're looking at only with companies less than 300 employees, not a public company. And they will have used or will use the full amount of round 1 loan. All right. Again, given the round 1 loan was done in April, May, June, time, I think up to August even, but 24 weeks has pretty much passed by. So you will have to have used all those. It doesn't mean you have to have forgiveness already done and received, but it's just that you've used those dollars. The next part is really important. You have to have a revenue reduction of 25% or more if you compare 2020 to 2019. It can be any of the quarters, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. You have to use the same quarter though. Okay, so if you're looking at quarter 2 in 2020, which if we're a calendar year business, it's going to be April, May, June. You want to compare that revenue to quarter 2 in 2019. Again, April, May, June. All right.
Can you do it on an annual basis and not necessarily just a quarter?
You can do it. However, you have to have your tax returns done, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yes. Yeah, so if you look at that and, but you do have to say this, and again, the forms that come up on this do specify which quarter you're going to do, and I'll show you that.
Are you going to cover the documentation needed?
Yes.
All right.
So on this also with round 2, it expands the eligibility to further other other charities, other nonprofits. So a 501c6, such as Beacon, is a 501c6 in association. Okay, that was not eligible before. Now 501c6s that have employees are eligible. Also 501c19, which are various veterans organizations are. So if you know people in that area, they are also eligible now. All right.
Amy, while you're talking about nonprofits, this is really a big issue for those that were able to successfully raise funds. They took a PPP and then were able to make up the difference by successful fundraising in the third and fourth quarters. They suddenly find themselves probably not eligible for round two.
That's why a lot of them are looking at are at quarter two, was when everything shut down and a lot of the, spring things really stopped at that point. But you're right.
But if you got your PPP in quarter two, you still had income.
No, the PPP does not count as income. It is not considered income because it was a loan.
Even though it's ultimately forgiven. You
Even
may
if
not
it's
pay
totally-
tax on it, but it doesn't count as income?
It does not count as income.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. Very good point, Louis. Yes.
Amy, Richard again. So just to clarify, if you're applying for the first time now, again, sole proprietor, are you doing round one or round two?
It's called round two, draw one. Okay. And that one, you don't have to show the year-to-year decrease in revenue. You're
And
just applying as a company. You
And which
still have
form?
to,
I'm sorry, which form is that then? The first one you said, the PPP form?
it's going to be on the system as round two, draw one.
Great.
And,
Thank you.
and with your banks, they will, if you are working with a bank, and a lot of the banks that are doing this
Yeah.
are the small community banks, okay? Wells Fargo, yes, is doing it. PNC, yes, is doing it. They've actually, but where you have a banking relationship is going to be where you want to do it because your funds are already there. A lot of the banks, especially the community banks, are saying, yeah, we know what's going on. And if you move to our bank, then we'll do this for you. It's a lot of work for these banks too. And they really are not getting paid much out of it.
Okay.
So, but make sure you have a relationship with that company because sometimes you have to give various statements and such. All right. The biggest
you.
issue, Richard, is, and it goes back to this, is what is your monthly average payroll costs?
Okay.
All right.
Got it. Thank
Times
you.
2.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right. The requirements are slightly different. Again, you must be operating as of February 15th. Okay. This is, again, the R2D2, the draw two. So if you just went into business, you may not be able to do it. You also have to not be in bankruptcy. All right. The calculation, this is what's also important for round two, is once if you can show that you had that 25% reduction in either the quarter or the full year, then the next item is you have to do the actual calculation for how much money you're going to get. That calculation is your monthly average payroll. I've been talking about that term for a while because that's really critical. Your monthly average payroll and then times 2.5. All right. Again, we're trying to spread it out. Monthly average, and then you do it for about 10 weeks. That's the 2.5. You have a choice here. You want to either use 2019 payroll costs or 2020 payroll costs. All right, you have the option. So I have a company who really went down in that second quarter, and she's able to do her payroll costs in 2019 because those were higher than in 2020 when she had to let some people go. All right. If you are in the restaurant or hospitality industry, however, you have a multiplier of 3.5. All right.
And Amy, the benefits and things like that, that's not included in payroll costs, is it?
It is the healthcare. So that in the payroll cost for the calculation will be the healthcare that you pay to your employees, for your employees, not. Sorry, guys. Wonders of working from home. It is the payroll costs, which also includes SUDA and also the healthcare costs. Now, I'll talk about the forgiveness later because that gets into more calculations. But for the payroll costs, it is the retirement, the healthcare, and such, yes. So I'm calling it generalized payroll costs, and it is a little bit more detailed than that.
Then if you already did that for the first round, do you have to again submit it for the second round?
You have to submit it just to say how much it is, yes.
But the
Okay.
documentation, I mean.
Right, and again, you want to do the same calculation for 2020 and see if you're higher.
No, I'm just saying if you did it for 2019, you could do it, submit the same information for 2019 for phase 2. You have to resubmit all that information.
Yes. Well, I don't know yet because the big banks haven't come out with their application and what's required. But that's to your point. That's why you probably want to go through that original financial institution because they already have that information. And if you recall, when you did that, the PPP round 1, you also had to submit your incorporating agreement. You had to show your IRS that you've got an EIN number. You had to put in a lot of other information in that original submission.
Yeah,
All right.
that's what I'm saying. You may not have to do the same thing then.
If you're working with the same financial institution, they may already have that information.
And do you have any idea when they're going to be up and running? Because mine is not ready yet.
Correct. So what happened was round 2, draw 1 opened on Monday for only small community financial institutions.
Yeah.
And that was just for those who had not applied already to those small entities. On Wednesday, then, that was yesterday, the same thing for those specific institution was open for those institutions for the round 2. Tuesday of next week is the date I'm hearing, that's 19th. That's the date I'm hearing that everybody else is going to be open. Okay. Now, remember, similar to what happened in the spring, all the banks have to do all their programming to get this right based upon the guidance given from the SBA. All right. They are going to be working overtime, working over the weekend, working 24/7. All right. I think they've learned before, and I'll tell you, I give these banks so much credit for doing what they did in such a short period of time. I really do. They were operating with information that was changing on an hourly basis. So
Yeah, I agree.
they're more prepared now, but I would not have expectations that it's absolutely smooth. Okay, so just bear with it. Understand that there may be some problems, and understand that you're getting free money. It's okay. All right.
Just
I'm sorry, for the R2D2 for a sole proprietor, is the max the same allowable?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm looking at, and I haven't seen the specifics on, is can a sole proprietor use, or even a single member LLC, use the 2020 Schedule C, which is not yet filed, right? Can you use Schedule C as your, because you could for 2019, right? That's what you used, was line 31 on Schedule C. Can you use the same information for 2020? And again, you want to take a look, whether you've got employees, whether you're a sole proprietor, you always want to take a look at 2019 versus 2020 and see where you're going to get higher dollars. All right. So Mark, hold on to that question. Hopefully we'll have an answer on Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Amy, real quick, regarding timing, I did get a Wells Fargo email a couple of days ago, and they said application process would be opened by the end of this week.
For a lot of the companies that are saying that, what that means is they'll take your email.
Okay.
M&T's been doing it. TD Bank's been sending out everything as well. And all it is we'll accept your email, but not the actual full application. Now, Wells Fargo may be ahead of the curve, but I heard from the SBA yesterday, their information is that it's open on Tuesday.
Amy, I have a quick question on the average payroll costs. If you have employees at over 100K, is the 100K just compensation, or is the 100K would include, and you cannot, shall I say, add in IRAs or simple IRAs or your healthcare costs? Do you think that the 100,000 is strictly limited to compensation, or is it everything together?
Okay, is this for self-employed?
No, for a corporation.
Okay, for a corporation, it is considered compensation. So let me rephrase that. If there is an employee who received over 100,000, that 100,000 is maximized for the payroll costs in the calculation. So even if you had additional retirement benefits paid to that employee, even if there are additional healthcare benefits paid for that employee, it's still maximized out at $100,000 for that payroll costs.
Okay, I'd seen two different sites. One said it was just compensation, and the other one agreed with your interpretation. So that's why I was trying to get another. Are you pretty 100% confident in that interpretation?
I would say call me after Tuesday when I see more of the definitives and the actual calculations that are being sent from the SBA.
Thank you.
Okay, because that has been always an issue, and it is definitely, by the way, for people, it is gross pay. All right, so that's also one thing to consider. Zoe, I see people doing chats, so if they are public, could you let me know if there are questions there? If they're private, I'll just hang on afterwards.
No questions so far. Just a couple people had to jump off, but thanking you for the help. So,
okay. They are welcome. Okay, my last point there on this slide is, again, apply soon. $284 billion is available. Okay. Who knows how much is going to go out? Okay, it's open until March 31. But I know on Tuesday the sites are going to be busy. Okay. Okay. I got stop share because I went into that. Go to here. Sorry, guys. From the current slide. Okay. And share the screen. Nope. Share that screen and share. And nope. I have to do the share first. Share. Go to here. Share. And the current slide. Okay, now it's working. Okay. So with the round 2, draw 2, which is what we're in, which is where people had already had a PPP, the question often comes, the forgiveness of round 1. Do you have to do that before now? So the round 1, you must have already spent those funds. All right. Now remember, it was for 24 weeks that for a PPP loan that you probably got in April. So hopefully everybody has already done that. Now, you can actually do the forgiveness now, but like I said, there are a lot of people who just, that new form of under 150,000 just came out. So we've got a lot of clients who are now saying, okay, now I can apply, but they didn't have it before. All right. So just look at that. And the forgiveness application time period for R2D2 for that second round, I haven't heard yet on that one either. I presume, again, it's going to be after the 24 weeks, the form will be available and we'll move forward from there. Again, 60 days for the bank and 90 days for the SBA. Okay. Now, the forgivable expenses. This is really, again, a huge win for businesses, because what's happened here is it's the same as round 1 with the payroll costs, with the gross payroll, with the SUTA, with the healthcare, with the retirement. And again, and to, I think it was Jeff who was saying, Those payroll costs are the gross payroll, the suit of the health insurance and retirement contributions limited to that 100,000 per employee, but you include in all that when you did the calculation, okay? And also you get to include your rent, your utilities, any interest on mortgages, okay? However, what happened, again, everybody started saying yay, additional expenses have been added. And this is also critical because now it's, if you had PPE for employees, I have a client who's in a partnership of medical doctors. They had to purchase all PPE for their employees and have some extra masks outside for the people who came in who didn't know about it, didn't bring their mask. All of those expenses, again, starting from now, from the time you get the loan going forward, those additional costs can now be included in the use of those funds. The outdoor dining, people had to build some new tables, the new chairs, the heaters and everything. All of that can be included if you were in a restaurant. Supplier costs are now included. So a lot of the information or other things related to more operating expenses are now being included for the use of those funds and to be added in as a forgiveness. So costs associated with software, cloud computing, all right? I personally just implemented Teams to get all of my business on the cloud. Well, I've already spent that, so that's not included. But if companies want to do any type of infrastructure improvements like that, they can do that. The other human resources and accounting needs, the law specifically says other human resources and accounting needs. All right. So those are now allowed to be utilized with these funds. Another interesting one was the property damage due to public disturbances. They realized some people did not have everything covered. All right. So that was putting them in a disastrous situation. That is now, you can utilize those costs in relation to that. Also, the extension of some of the benefits, the group life, the disability, vision, and dental benefits, all of those can also be included in the expenses available for forgiveness. Okay. Any questions on that? Because this is an area that just opened up a lot of operating expenses for people to use those funds for. Remember, 60% still has to be used on the payroll. However, this is all included as well. We're good? Okay. This is the second draw borrower application form. All right. And what's important here is, for those of you who did draw one, it's going to be similar where you're putting in what type of a company you are. Okay. You then have, again, legal name, various codes, your address, and things like that. This is where it's important, though. The average monthly payroll times the 2.5, the number of employees, purpose of the loan. You can check all these boxes. This is really for informational purposes, or you can just check payroll, utilities, covered operating. Okay. This is the first draw SBA loan number. Again, that's an important loan. If I'd known ahead of time how many times this is going to come up with all these application forms, make sure you know that number, you get that. Here, though, is the reduction in gross receipts. All right. And what's also interesting, you have to show the quarter. And again, it's 2020 versus 2019. Has to be the same quarter. You give your gross receipts here and here. It's got to be 25% or more of a reduction. What's interesting is for applicants of loans for 150,000 or less, you can leave that blank, but you must provide it before seeking loan forgiveness or upon the SBA request. So I look at this and say, just provide it. All right. It's easier to provide it now. Keep it with your documents. Have a P&L run that shows that reduction and you should be good. Okay. And then again, similar to the other one, they really aren't looking at anybody with 20% or greater of the business, ownership of the business.
So Amy, quick question.
Yes, Carrie.
In regards to the documentation for the 25% reduction, you said just run a P&L. So if we just pull something out of, we use QuickBooks, something simple, just pulling a comparison quarter to quarter will be sufficient for that?
Yes. So create a report which has your full year 2020, and then have it done by quarter and do the comparison to 2019 and have the system do the calculation for you. Print that report and keep it in your files.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And really just highlight that if you want. Do it as a PDF or Excel, however you want it. I'd rather do it as a PDF so it shows it's official. Okay. And you're not able to play around with the numbers.
Yeah. Okay.
That's my auditing hat on. And then just circle it, keep it in your documentation. And if you want to upload it with this, I think you can, but at least keep it in your file. So when you are asked, you have that available.
Perfect. Thank you.
And if
Amy, if I
anybody
may-
else, let me just say this. If anybody else needs help in calculating that, please give me a call. Okay. All right, Newell?
Yeah, so in calculating the quarter over quarter, if I operate on a cash basis or a client operates on a cash basis, do we have to take into consideration delayed billings and receipts?
It's as you operate. So if you
Okay.
if you run the business as cash, you have it as cash. If you run the business on accrual, you run it that way. Okay.
Good enough.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And you do not, again, this is my CPA, my ethical hat on, do not move things around, guys. Okay. If you, as your, I've heard in some of the chats that I've been doing, well, I didn't make it in third quarter, so I moved some money around into the second quarter so it looks better and I can get it. That's fraud. Okay, so do not do that. Any other questions on this form? It's really a relatively simplified form. Okay. All right. So now with all of this discussion, we have to remember that the PPP is actually a loan. All right. So if by chance you're not able to utilize all of the funds and get full forgiveness, the matter is it's still a loan. However, it's a 1% loan over 5 years. So it really should not, from a business perspective, make that much of a difference. 1% loan is really rather nice these days. Okay. The payments, again, it is a 5-year loan and the payments start at this point. I've seen it at 6 months after the loan receipt. Now, that was the original time for draw one. It had to be modified because we weren't out of the pandemic when things were supposed to be getting due. But if you notice anybody, if you're not forgiven, the interest expense will still be there for you. But again, it's not going to be that difficult to pay back, hopefully, for everybody. All right. And again, the payments start 6 months. I believe that is still the case. Still looking for that information. Questions on that? All right. Last slide. There were other changes in the stimulus package that may affect you. An interesting part is, and again, this is individuals, not businesses, but direct payments to citizens, that $600 that many people received this year in 2021. That was based on the 2019 tax return. Okay. So if you did not get it all, when you do the 2020 tax return, you may be adjusting for that as well. So if somebody was over in 2019, over that 75,000, and they were limited on that the $600 that came in. If when you do your 2020 tax return, you actually made less, you may end up getting a credit back for that. All right, so just realize that if you did not get that 600, you may be able to get more. Okay, based upon your 2020 tax return.
But that's likely to go up to a total of 2,000 with President Biden, so.
It is, and also what will happen though is it's still going to be limited probably to the 75,000, which is based on the 2019. So again, if your income went down in 2020 and you, because of the pandemic or because of whatever, and you made less than that 75,000, but you made more in 2019, so you didn't get the full either 600 or 2,000, you may be able to get more back when you reconcile your 2020 tax return. All right, there are also expanded unemployment benefits. Again, this is for individuals with the 11-week extension, and then at the 300, and then PUA has also been extended. That's the pandemic unemployment assistance. Charitable contributions. This is an interesting one that kind of snuck in last year and actually has been extended for both been extended into 2021 as well. For those people who do not itemize, and a lot of people are not itemizing anymore because of the limitations on the state and local taxes, and because you now have to have at least $12,000 in itemized deductions as a single and $24,000 for married filing joint, you no longer would get the ability to deduct your charitable contributions because that used to be on the itemized page. The thing that snuck in is now people can have up to $300 per person. So if you're filing joint, it's $600 in 2020 and 21 that you get in the front page of the tax return. So even though you're not itemizing, you can still take charitable deductions this year and next year. Okay, so if you have anybody with if you know people in a nonprofit, you can, I've used that for a couple of my clients to say, hey, there's a marketing thing, you can do that. FSA, for those people who have an FSA, which is a flexible spending account, often this is used for child care and other things like that. That actually, because a lot of people weren't able to use it because their kids were home and the daycares were closed. Those roll over from 2020 to 2021, and again from 21 into 2022. That's never happened before, so that's why that's also important. There is the EIDL grants are still available for low-income communities. There are also dedicated funding now for live venues, for movie theaters, cultural institutions. So their ballet company in Philadelphia or in Charlottesville or something, there are available funds for those type of entities to try to get them going again. Finally, this does affect the business. In the past, when you filled out your tax return, you took that 50% deduction for meals because only 50% was allowed as a tax deduction. In 2021 and 2022, it is now at 100%. Why? Somebody wanted the 3 martini lunches is what is going around in the sites. But, you know, get those restaurants working again. I'm not sure, but how it affects us is that's no longer a deduction. So now you can get 100% of those meals. My information is here. I am available. Note that my email is amy.anderson now. The other one still works with amy@PriceTurner, but it's amy.anderson, and Anderson is spelled with 2 S's. So if you want to email me, that's fine. My number is also there, 610-733-4224. And love to hear if you've got questions. We are helping people with this. It's a lot of information, I know. So if you need somebody to, to talk it through, let us know.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.